Mom of four amazing beings that range in age from 8 to 22, currently residing in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is super exciting for me because this is our the kids' first time at an Agile Learning Center. They've been there at ALC Mosaic for about a month now, and we are absolutely loving it. Before then, we were strictly at home. So my kids also did a year and a half stint in public schools. So yeah. They're still recovering from that experience. Also, I am a recovering educator. I worked in education, public schools, charter schools for 20 years. I'm going to pass the mic to Janice. Yep. That's what you
Me?
get for showing up. That's what you get for showing up.
I'm not on the list. Are we just going around the circle?
If you want to just skip and pass it to Alex.
Well, okay. I'll just say I'm Janice, she, her, and I run Tipping Points magazine right now. And yes, I will pass it to Alex, who runs Tipping Point Press.
Okay, well, you gave my intro, so yeah, I'm Alex Coast, he, him pronouns. I run Tipping Points Press, publishing books about self-directed education and soon zines. I have 3 children and 1 on the way. The older 3 are unschooling. The 4th one, I don't know what their education's like. And my kids have been in free schools, agile learning centers, unschooling centers, something kind of like a liberated learners model for a while. And I've run a free school, a junk playground, and I work at Green School, which is an agile learning center in Romania that my wife, who's on the call, is the director of. And I also work in a model of education called Flying Squads. I think I hand it then to David. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. 100%. My name is David. I work in Portland, and in Portland, I work at the Village Free School. And at the Village Free School, I am a facilitator. And then I also maybe do flying squats, but that hasn't been done in a while. I had a model as to how to answer all this, but I kind of forgot right away. Thank you. I'll pass it to, who am I passing it to? Bria? Okay.
I think so. Intros are hard, and we are all very real people, as you can probably tell. Yeah, I did flying squads with David and then got pregnant a year and a half ago. So haven't done that in 10 months since the baby came. So I have a 10-month-old and a 12-year-old, very opposite sides of the spectrum of how much they need you. And I work with the Alliance and have for about 7 years now, and also have facilitated in a bunch of different ways. And I am a grown unschooler, so I grew up in this philosophy of education. I'm gonna open the floor. I can make up stuff for us to answer if no one wants to start, but I'm gonna open the floor to you all. So feel free if you want to take yourself off mute and ask a question, or drop it in the chat. I will read them out loud.
I've got a question. It has to do more with the internal workings of ASDE than it does with the education models that they support. But I've been a big fan of ASDE for a long time now. And I watched with all kinds of curiosity as internal goings on happened. And I'm working with a bunch of people all over the world now, trying to forge an alliance around self-directed education or free learning or whatever it is that we call it. And that's one of the things that comes up is all the different perspectives. When you have lots of self-directed people, then you have lots of people who are attached to their own perspectives. So it becomes really difficult to actually agree on anything. And I'm just curious, what are the lessons you guys have learned from the processes you've gone through in this organization that might make it easier for large groups of people to come to agreement? Anything?
I'll say in general, I think not even just in an alliance, but in communion with people in general, just trying to keep reminding yourself that it's important to focus on the things that you have in common, and that most people are good people with good intention, and to try and embrace commonalities, but then also to know where your boundaries are, and to make sure that if at some point those get crossed, especially as an alliance, if you have a mission, to stick to it, even if that means making difficult choices, and saying goodbye to people, or saying, this isn't working as a relationship. And specifically with regard to self-directed education, I think it's really important. I've thought a lot about this and had a lot of conversations, debates, and even arguments, or people yelling at me about my own thoughts on self-directed education. And I think it's important to remember what we have in common, and also to really point out what we don't have in common. Self-directed education, while it's a very niche genre, has a broad umbrella of methodologies, and to learn as much as you can from one another, and to be honest about what the differences are, and to try and be open with them. So that's not always necessarily an easy thing, and I certainly haven't necessarily done it right all the time, and I don't think ASDE's done it right all the time either. But being as open as you can and as gentle as you can going forward, and doing the best we can within self-directed education to celebrate the diversity of methodologies as much as we possibly can.
Thanks, Alex. It just strikes me that when it comes down to figuring out what you do have in common, how to express that is challenging.
David always tells me that if we're always agreeing on everything, we might become dogmatic, and actually disagreement in groups is important. And it's a good reminder, because I get frustrated when we have disagreements. Like, I tend to be like, why can't we all think the same thing? And I don't actually want everyone to all think the same thing. I think conflict is really difficult, but it is really important. And I think if we all had this like hive mind of yes to all the same things, then we wouldn't be like learning and pushing on each other. So I like that reminder, because I think I forget, even though I agree with it, that the conflict is important and that we shouldn't agree all the time. I don't know if you want to expand on that, David, because it's your idea, not mine.
Well, there are no original ideas. Someone already had it, I'm sure. I kind of think of like, well, first, everyone has to sort of have the same vision, or same sort of like, not even mission, but not a mission. I don't know, something in where they agree enough, and then they can like, work on those little tiny details of disagreement. And so getting there is the most important, I think. Yeah, that's all I was thinking of.
I just wanted to add one other thought, because Sydney, you specifically said working with people internationally, and I think that it's really, really, really important internationally. As a person who now, as a person from the United States who's now working in a self-directed environment in Romania, there are differences in different cultures, and that impact self-directed education, and really respecting the culture, and respecting cultures that where things like self-directed education might be illegal, and understanding that a lot of people maybe can't do the things that they want to do, or just that it's going to look different, because culturally you have differences. So I think that's been a very humbling experience for me, because I've been doing this for so many years, and I was like, I know how to do it. I've been doing it right. And as I've encountered working in other countries and other places, realizing, oh, there's very different ways to do it and very different ways to look at it, and to sort of quietly observe when you're the outsider from that perspective, and when that means forming a union internationally of people, doing a lot more listening to one another.
Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful principle. And then you have the actual experience of it, which it's not just a question of different cultures. It's, as you mentioned, there's also the problem of different legal structures. For instance, in Germany, they have a law against homeschooling, right? You can't even do it legally. So you have a lot of people who are focused on changing the legal structure at that level as being the first step, before you even have a chance to agree on all the other philosophical things below that. It's another instance. I've worked with a lot of groups, but it's just fascinating to me how you find the sort of magic pathways towards making progress as a group. It's always a challenge.
I think what's interesting is this idea of like the pure way of doing things. The purity culture is very white supremacist, and it's very like it has to be done one way. Working, trying to do away with that and being okay with the grays a lot is really important. Especially as someone who is from different culture, and then doing something in a more Western kind of way, you have to like figure out how to what parts fit and what doesn't. And then that helps with doing things with other cultures and other places. So yeah, the purity thing, kind of doing away with that.
I'm impressed that as ASDE actually came up with a name for itself. Because you have people who will refuse to use the word education in this context because they see it as a very oppressive idea.
I actually don't think any of us on here were there when they came up with a name for themselves. Alex, you weren't there, were you?
No, the Alliance for Self-Directed Education predates, I think, everybody that's a part of the organization now. Interestingly enough, we literally just were questioning on the ASDE Slack whether to change the name or not. Peter Gray had prompted the idea of changing it. And I was one of the people saying, maybe we should get rid of the word education. I do want to say as well, I've a lot of like a country like Germany, for example, as you mentioned, where not only is homeschooling illegal, but self-directed education is illegal. And there's many places like that in the world. Talking about it outside of education, and like using things like junk playgrounds or play spaces or after school or whatever as a way of integrating that into is a wonderful technique.
I just wanted to add, for going back to what David said about the purity culture and white supremacy, it's also these conversations about like, should we use this word and what should we name it? For me, like I don't care. Like none of that matters for me. It's about what are we doing as an organization and how is it impacting young people? Right? So like I could care less, but that doesn't matter. People get caught up in definitions and in names. And I'm like, but what is the work? Right? Like, what are we doing and how are we impacting these people's lives, the families that are choosing to walk this path with us? What does that look like? So sometimes when we just let go of those definitions and say, so what are we going to do? Like even in places like Germany, regardless of what we call it, what is the work that we can do there to start allowing people to live into this lifestyle?
yeah, like names and titles and things, those are gonna be like out of mode or not in fashion anymore, you know. So kind of leaving that behind and just doing the actual work.
When the actual work is actually coming to agreement, though, it becomes more challenging.
I think that's always going to be a challenging part of the work. I want to
What
open
if it wasn't a part of the work? Like, what if everybody didn't have to agree and there was a way to move forward with people still not agreeing?
Yes. I want to open it up to more questions too.
I have a question. I'm Jennifer. I am a volunteer and a board member at St. Louis Sudbury School in Missouri. And we recently shifted from having 2 paid staff members to being all volunteers, like a week ago. So we're kind of like in this in-between space right now. But one of the things that a lot of the volunteers, and a lot of people have been with Sudbury for over, a year and a half or longer. But we're kind of like figuring out how much, I guess, how much like exposure or how much sort of leading in we should do with kids when we want them to be, have that space and the time to be bored or to explore what they want to explore at school. But then sometimes there are kids that are not sure what to do for, weeks on end kind of thing. And then, there's some volunteers that come in and say like, oh, I really love to do, this kind of drawing or some other activity. And there's just like that dynamic of navigating whether, how much to sort of encourage and how much to just let things happen. Do some people have some thoughts on that? It's a group setting, so there's about 14 kids there.
If you don't mind me jumping in, we have that all the time. That question always comes up with our kids. And I always try to, instead of focusing on what their interests are, I focus on who they're relating to. So, like if that will open up avenues, like definitely feeling like if someone has a hard time opening up to me, trying to find a way to, sort of edge myself in so I can be like, hey, I'm actually a safe person. And then those other things will come up. I'm not sure if like all the stuff like think like that, but definitely that's my way of doing it. And I've seen success and I think it works and it's the best way. So never mind.
Jennifer, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is there like an underlying fear or concern about the kids not knowing what they actually want to do for weeks on end?
Not really. I mean, we had back in, I guess it was November, December, kind of a top-down decision from some of the adults to restrict screen use. Because there were some kids that were watching TikTok for like 7 hours a day, every day kind of thing. So I think there was some disagreement on that among the students and among the adults at school. And yeah, I do too, David. Yeah, so I think it just kind of stirred up some anxiety maybe about like, well, what should I be doing? Or what do I want to do? And now that you've taken this away from me, what do I do? So there may be some underlying confusion or just like unknown right now with that. I don't know if it's fear though. It's probably just the unknown.
May I chime in? I have so many thoughts on this. First off, around screens, as well as anything, I always say, when you restrict something, you fetishize it. And so as soon as, I don't care whether it's screens or anything else, I remember as a kid growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, all the kids in my neighborhood had toy guns. And there was one family that didn't allow their kid to have toy guns, and that kid would pick up a stick and shoot people and ran around and you know, and so just as an example of something that's not screens. So and I'm not even necessarily saying not to restrict screens. I've been in environments where we have for certain reasons, but I won't go into that. But just to, I think the answer for what your initial question was, Jennifer, for me is it depends. My kids who, you know, my oldest is 17 and knows that he can tell me, no, go away, stop talking to me, or I don't want to do that, or stop bothering me, or whatever. I'm suggesting things to him all the time, and I'm pushing him all the time because we have a relationship that's respectful and trustful, and he knows that he can push back on anything. A kid who I've just met in a self-directed environment, I'm almost never going to suggest anything to them. My approach is games. Even if it's kids who are in a self-directed environment, like for example, I started at Green School a year ago, and there have been kids at that school who have been self-directed their whole lives. I still didn't suggest things or offer things up to them for the most part. And I still to this day just do a lot of playing games with them, and games for game's sake, just to have fun and to try and beat them at it or whatever, beat the game together if it's a cooperative game. And that always, in my experience, having done this for many years, that always leads to conversations and relationships and questions and things that they want to do. And it becomes its own path to then doing other things together. I do a lot. My favorite activity to do with kids is game design, where I'm like, let's play games, then let's pull it apart, make our own rules to it, see if we can make it more fun or balance it in some other way or whatever. And that always naturally leads to so many different projects and processes. I will say my own kids have been in more than one environment in self-directed schools where I was concerned because they were playing video games all day long. I have no issue with my kids. In fact, they're in the next room over sitting playing video games all day right now. I have no issue with that, but they were in environments where there was nothing else. Like I would go into the art room and I literally couldn't find a pencil. And that is not giving kids freedom. And of course, the easy thing to go to is to go to a video game or something like that. It's a lot harder to pick up a paintbrush or to start a science project or whatever. Like, and so you need to, even whether you're unschooling your kids or whether they're in some sort of a self-directed center or space, you as an adult, you are manipulating them in some way. You are preparing an environment, you're setting it up, and you need to be very thoughtful about that. There needs to be lots of different choices that are easy for them to choose if they want to choose it, that are just out there for them. And so I think that that's hugely important to think about as far as the environment. Yeah.
I do want to make something that probably is obvious to all of us speaking about this explicit, and that is that when we talk about like playing games or building relationships with kids because that will help engage them, we're not building relationships to get them to do something, even though it will ultimately get them to do something. We're building relationships because we care about being in relationship with them. So you're not just like trying to get in with the kid so then you can convince the kid to do what you want. Even though when you do get in with the kid, that relationship will be easier and you'll be able to push them and things like that. But that's not your goal, if that makes sense. It's this very nuanced thing where it's like, actually, we really care about being in relationship with you. And we know that's going to help both of us in this, but we're not only doing it to like trick you into something. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think for me, part of that So I asked the question because a lot of times personally, it's fear that comes up for me when I see that my kids are choosing to do things that I would not necessarily want them to choose. But I have to like continuously ask myself, like, am I trusting my kids in this scenario? Am I trusting that they are making decisions that are in their best interest? Am I trusting that they are going to learn what they need to learn when they need to learn it? And am I being a safe space for them when they need something that they'll feel comfortable coming to me and asking? So going back to building those relationships, a lot of times I'm letting my fear lead and not leaning into trusting them. That's when I find myself getting worried or nervous or concerned, like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I have gamers. My boys are 12 and 13. And before they started at the at ALC Center, they were playing video games for most of the day. And when we got there, they're like, oh, so we're changing our rules and you can't bring your devices to school. They were like, that's fine. Right. And not one time over the last month had they been like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just go back to, like, they've found other things to do without me having to say, oh, choose this or choose that. Because like Alex said, those things were available to them and they were interested in that. And then they come home and get back on their video games. So they have found a way to balance. And again, they're able to choose what they need to do in those moments. So that's huge to see that they are choosing to continue to go back to this school where they know that they're not going to be able to be on their devices all day. And that's okay for them.
I just wanted to add, thinking about that, what you just said, Domari, that when you're not necessarily unschooling, but you're unschooling in a center, when you are in a space, if you're in a Sudbury school, that's not about an individual. You're there as a community, and therefore there is something about a collective that you are obligated to something because you are now a part of something bigger than just yourself. And I don't think that that's made obvious often enough in self-directed centers, that like you can't just do whatever you want, in that you are a part of a community. And I know that's kind of a side tangent from it, but I think that's important to point out.
I also think that when the kids can go home and go straight to the games and have unlimited play on games, it kind of battles that scarcity mindset at the self-directed center. So if they're going home and they have restricted access and they have restricted access at the ALC or whatever it is, then it creates this big scarcity mindset. But if it's unlimited at home, I saw that with my son too. He was like, why are all my friends on their screens at the free school? They won't play with me. I'm sick of this. It's because they couldn't be on their screens at home. But then he didn't get to hang out and didn't know what to do because he could be on his games at home, but not see his friends at the school because they were on screens. Anyway, that's hard because you can't control parents, but I think it does help with what Alex was talking about. And the other thing I'll just add, in my experience, when you do have those relationships built with the kids and you are a safe person for them, it's easy, for me at least, to go up to them and be like, hey, it seems like you haven't gotten into anything lately, or you aren't sure what to do. Like, do you need help? Do you feel good about what's going on day to day for you? Or do you want me to support you in finding something else? And they'll tell me yes or no. And you got to respect what they say. If they're like, nope, don't need any help, leave me alone, I would respect that. But yeah, it just feels easy to casually ask, do you want support in this? Or do you feel good about how your days are going? Sorry, I got lost in a lot of buttons on Zoom. That's not, okay. Afi, I think you sent a message just to me that might have been to everyone, but I'm not gonna read it out loud in case it wasn't to everyone. Any more questions?
I want to ask anyone from this meeting, not necessarily ASDE folks, in your work outside of ASDE, and for those who are not in ASDE, in your schools or groups or whatever, how do you hold space for parents? Because I live in that country that has self-directed education as a thing that nobody ever heard of. So we are trying for a few years now, at least to translate terms and keep using them in all contexts for people to get used that this is a thing. How do you hold space for parents? Because if we talk about a community and I see the kid as part of their first community is the family, and I see the kid as a whole with my community. To make it short, for me it's 11 p.m. I'm sorry. To make it very short, I see family as community members as well, not as main focus of the place where I work, but I'm curious about other ways of holding space for parents and their fears and their worries and their questions and expectations and all of that. And the question is for whoever feels that has an answer. I don't seek for any good answer, just for different experiences.
Hello. Hello everyone. Thank you for all your insights. I've been listening really with interest because I'm an unschooling mom, and I kind of found out about the work of the Alliance sort of as I, progressed on with the unschooling. And I wanted to sort of answer Sonia's. I think I've tried find my way as I was doing the unschooling, and it's basically, finding some groups and networks and forums online and parents who share the same kind of approach to helping their kids and guiding them through the whole unschooling or self-directed learning. And that's how it's built. I found few on Facebook. I found on the Self-Directed Alliance as well few links and information. And there's a few sites as well. And that's how I kind of reached out to other parents to find out and learn a bit more. I think, as you all said at the start, there are differences. So the more I kind of connect and network with people, I find out, what are the common points, what are things that are different depending on where people come from or how comfortable they are to, whether to apply the whole, approach of unschooling or self-directed learning, and, find my own way until I'm comfortable with, and then kind of go on to the next step. And that's how I try to handle it. But yeah, if you need anything like information, I'm happy to forward anything that I found helpful at the start. I don't know how many years are you at the start of your journey for doing self-directed learning, or you don't have to answer that, but I'm just saying, depending on where you are, I'm happy to share resources and information that could help.
I'm gonna say this: we are in our 10th year. We are starting our 10th year, but the challenge is still there. A lot of people, especially when kids grow older, parents get scared because they never seen anyone following this path before us being the first celebrated environment in Romania. It means they don't have anyone to compare it with. And the pandemic helped us a lot because we got connected with other people from other countries. Because, okay, if during the pandemic, a lot of people opened up their resources that till that point there were like closed conference, face-to-face conferences, and events that if you want to attend, you need to pay thousands of dollars for traveling and accommodation, and not to speak about visas and all processes. But I would, I do not know where you are located, but I can, maybe we can have a list of resources in the chat and writing links or whatever, because who knows, maybe we can help each other. Like for me, it's the 10th year, but for the school, every single year it's like the first, because we have new parents that never heard of celebrated education, and you cannot roll your eyes and think, oh, I've explained this so many times, because my duty is this, and is to promote it and to dig deeper. And there are so many people who think that there's only one way to do self-directed education. And with that being said, with all the definitions between US and Europe, and within Europe, we have so many different definitions, community and sense of belonging, they are very important. And I'm going to say that I think parents, no matter where they are, they have kind of the same worries, no matter what is the system. And I keep saying that I never seen a parent that cares about their children not worried about their future and their education, no matter how that looks like. But any resources that you may have, any groups, and personally, anything that is not necessarily online, because online in US usually means after work in US, which is our sleeping time, our night time. So whatever resources I would appreciate.
Sonia, one of the things that is kind of intrinsic to the way the Sudbury model is kind of built, but we often have some of the older students who are on the student board or who are responsible for, hiring committee, a lot of those kinds of things. I think often when we have teenagers connecting and talking directly to adults, to parents in the community, I think they're kind of wowed by their level of maturity and their understanding and their depth in a way. So I think for some parents, that's sort of reassuring. Sometimes it helps alleviate some fears that they can see that, oh, like these kids are okay. Yeah. And I always love watching some of those online webinars from like Liberated Learners, some of the other groups where they have alums or kids that have been unschooled or self-directed education settings for a long time, and just all the cool things that they're doing. I love hearing from them.
We are doing exactly that, especially for parents who are visiting the school, just that our oldest is just 14 and it's one of 14. The rest of them, they are not 14 yet. But what helped our parents the most was when I invited Bria to speak in an Ask Me Anything event, because she is an adult that had this path in life. So they see someone like, you're 10, it's cute, like the young ones, the young parents who have kids like 1, 2, 3 looking forward for our kindergarten, they are like impressed. But when their kids are 10, like, oh my God, I need to figure out college already, because why not? And then they've met Bria and they were I think you were one of the people with the most questions, like university. Tell me about that, because I had many people invited. So one of the things that we did, it was to create spaces like this and to invite one person to share their experiences, whatever, parent, facilitator, manager, whatever, just bring your questions. But definitely the most challenging and the most successful, I think it will be when we will have older kids that can articulate their ideas, because they can articulate their ideas very nicely at 11, but when you live in a country that doesn't respect children that much and puts them in a specific place, like adults are talking now. Like I even had a feedback recently from a mom saying we should not bring kids in the visiting days because they are distracting our attention from the important stuff. And I'm like, nice to meet you. So it filters, but I think one challenge is for my country to have adults that went to this path, and the other one is to connect with the world, because we cannot wait for another 10 years for that to happen. But yeah, I'm good with switching to another question. Like, I don't want to occupy too much space.
I'm going to stop the recording. We have 10 minutes.